Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
About 31 years ago when I started practicing law, I used to get a lot of calls about odometer tampering. And then it went away for a while. And it seemed to have gone away. And then all of a sudden it's back again, like with a vengeance. Now I get calls about it and I see it in the news. And so I like to point out to people that odometer tampering is something you really shouldn't do for two reasons. One is it's illegal in the sense that you can get arrested for it. But number two, you can be sued for it also. So both of those things can happen to you. And of course, odometer tampering encompasses a whole bunch of different things. One is where you literally make the numbers on the dashboard read lower than what they ought to. You can also replace the instrument cluster with one that reads lower. That's illegal. In some vehicles, you could disconnect the odometer and then reconnect it later. That's illegal. So all of these things that cause the mileage to read differently than it ought to are illegal by state statute and federal statute. So the feds can come after you and the state can come after you. So it's not something I recommend. But from justice.gov, the website of the Department of Justice, 2 New Jersey men plead guilty in Pennsylvania in scheme involving odometer tampering and title fraud. And so remember that if you were to tamper with the odometer, that's against the law. And then if you write those numbers down on a title and certify them as accurate, that's a separate violation of the law for which you can also get in trouble. 2 New Jersey men have pleaded guilty in the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania for their roles in falsifying vehicle titles as part of a long-running odometer rollback scheme. So they got them for the titles. They didn't even bother with the odometers themselves. They worked this out as a plea deal and said, well, just plead guilty to the titling problems. According to court documents, one man's 58 years old. He owns a car dealership. He pleaded guilty Wednesday to 1 count. And the other man is 34, also pleaded guilty to 1 count. And he worked at the dealership of the other man. As part of their plea agreements, the two admitted that for a 4-year period ending in 2016, they engaged in a scheme to sell high mileage used vehicles with false low mileage readings entered on the vehicle's odometers and then on the titles. According to court filings, the defendants purchased high mileage vehicles from individuals, arranged to alter the vehicle's odometers to reflect false lower mileage readings, and then obtained motor vehicle titles reflecting those false lower mileages. The two then used the fraudulent title documentation and artificially lower odometer readings to sell the vehicles, including at an auction located in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. So that's how they wind up over there in court. By deceiving purchasers into believing the vehicles had fewer miles than they actually had, defendants sold the vehicles at inflated prices, resulting in consumers paying more for the vehicles than they would have paid had they known the true mileage. Now, here's the deal. A lot of people assume that Carfax or equivalent services will catch all of these. And it might. I've seen Carfaxes that showed mileage discrepancy. And the mileage is low here, it climbs here, it climbs here, it drops here, climbs here, and it says mileage discrepancy. The numbers are going the wrong way. And I've seen it where it was a fat finger mistake where someone just typed in the wrong number, like an oil change or something. But I've also seen it where, no, they caught somebody doing something like this. But Carfax isn't omniscient. They get their information from different sources, often car dealers, oil change places, and body shops, for example. So if I bought a car brand new and did all the oil changes myself, it never needed warranty work. I did all the service myself, and I never took it to a body shop, an oil change shop, or a dealership. And I sell it 5 years down the road. Somebody could roll the odometer back, and Carfax wouldn't catch it. And none of those services would catch it because the information would have been recorded by anybody. So that's how these things can slip through the cracks. Now, Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General Brian Boynton, who is head of the Justice Department's Civil Division, said, when individuals misrepresent the mileage on used cars, they deceive consumers into paying more money for those cars while also hiding vital information that can impact vehicle safety and repair costs. We are committed to protecting consumers by prosecuting individuals who engage in this type of fraud. One of the things that many people also don't think about is the mileage that reads on your dashboard is often now recorded elsewhere inside the vehicle's electronics system. There's going to be some module on board that tracks that. And so I've seen it before where you can change what visually shows on the dashboard, but it doesn't change it in here. And I've also seen it where people have managed to change both of those, but there's other stuff that gave them away. So it's fascinating but quite confusing because so many different manufacturers do this differently. Again, back to the Assistant Attorney General. We are committed to protecting consumers by prosecuting individuals who engage in this type of fraud. And like I said, they don't catch everybody. And in fact, if they get a report of one person spinning an odometer and you report them to the feds will probably say, oh, that's interesting, and take a note of it, but they've got more important stuff to do. But what happens is when somebody is doing it a lot, they've done a whole bunch of these, and those are the stories I've done before, where somebody's done this 30, 40, 50 times and gotten caught. That's where the feds go, okay, we got to stop these people because they're really causing trouble. We're proud of our collaboration with the Department of Justice to investigate odometer fraud, said Deputy Administrator Dr. Stephen Cliff of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. So NHTSA was involved too. Our top priority is keeping people safe on the road. Anyone who thinks they've been a victim of odometer fraud needs to contact their state enforcement office. They can also visit our website, nhtsa.gov, for helpful information on how to detect a vehicle that may have had its odometer rolled back. In pleading guilty, the two men admitted they were part of a scheme that caused at least 118 cars. 118 cars be sold with rolled back odometers and falsified titles, resulting in consumer losses of at least $674,000. Now, that's probably what the cars sold for. If I had to guess where they got that number from, that's the cars sold for in aggregate. Now, you might say, but Steve, those cars had some value. And they did, by the way. So if I take a car that is worth $10,000 with known mileage, that is, there's nothing wrong with the title, nothing wrong with the odometer. The car's worth $10,000. If the odometer gets rolled back and gets revealed as mileage unknown due to the odometer rollback, the car is worth about $5,000. And I've spoken to many people in the auto industry, and there's some debate on this. But a safe rule of thumb is it might drop the value of the car in half. And that makes sense. If I'm looking at a car that's worth 10 grand with known mileage, oh, I'm sorry, the odometer's been spun back. Now what do you pay me for it? I pay you $5. Problem, of course, is that when I sell it, I got to say it's mileage unknown, so there's a good chance I'm stuck with it. The defendants are scheduled to be sentenced on August 31st and September 1st, respectively. They each face a maximum sentence of 5 years in prison on the conspiracy to commit fraud. A federal district court judge will determine any sentence after considering the U.S. sentencing guidelines and other statutory factors. The NHTSA Office of Odometer Fraud Investigation investigated the case. There are several trial attorneys involved, and NHTSA estimates that odometer fraud in the U.S. results in consumer losses of more than $1 billion annually. $1 billion with a B. Individuals with information relating to odometer tampering should call NHTSA's odometer fraud hotline, which is on their website. More information on odometer fraud is available on their website also, which you can look up. And for more information about the Consumer Protection Branch and its enforcement efforts, visit them at justice.gov and look for the Consumer Protection Branch icon. Click on it. For more information about the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, you can visit them at justice.gov. So government wants you to know that they're actually earning their keep for once, and they're doing good work. But as noted, there's $1 billion of this fraud happening every year in America. And they busted these guys and say that they committed about $600,000 worth of fraud in 4 years. So these guys are merely a drop in the bucket or a small fish in a big pond. Whatever cliche you want to put on that, feel free, my friends. But the point is that they got him. They got him. So if you are buying a vehicle, obviously if it's used, you should look it up and get a title history from somebody and see if anything pops up. There are also things that will occasionally look sketchy on a vehicle. I've seen vehicles where people have replaced instrument clusters and they've done it poorly. And it depends on what type of car it is and things of that nature. I know that back in the 60s and 70s when odometer fraud first became a thing that I was aware of, some instrument clusters were very, very hard to get into. Others were not. I also know that a lot of people who were messing around back in the days with a mechanical cable would kink the cable so that when you drove the car, the speedometer would do this. Occasionally you look in there and you see that row of numbers in there. And the row of numbers, the numbers would be off a little bit because they'd been taken out and played with and put back in. Back in the 50s and 60s, before there were federal statutes on odometer tampering, it was not uncommon that there's some states where they had no local laws on it, and odometer tampering was just rampant. I heard stories back in the day of people who take in cars in trade, or they'd buy them, and they would buy them in a state that had odometer laws and take them to a state that didn't, and have the odometers spun back there and either sell them down there or bring them back and say, well, it didn't happen here, it happened someplace else. I've had some people who want to argue and say that before there were laws against it, it wasn't illegal. And many people are going to stop when they hear me merely make that statement and go, Steve, obviously something's not illegal before there's a law against it. There are things that can be illegal before there's a specific law against it. Okay? And so we call odometer tampering sometimes odometer fraud. And as you can imagine, if somebody tampers with an odometer and then goes to sell you the car without disclosing that they have tampered with the odometer, what they're doing there is either, depending on the state you're in, it can be silent misrepresentation, it can be regular misrepresentation, and it might be fraud. And so even before there was a law on the books saying you cannot tamper with odometers, it was against common law. And most states, by the way, have codified those various things I just described to you. But even if they haven't, the common law is still there. So in Michigan, I can sue somebody for fraud. I can sue them for misrepresentation. So if there was no law against odometer tampering in Michigan, I could still sue somebody for it. But the good thing about the law is it says not only can you sue them for it, you can get your attorney fees and court costs paid. That's the important thing that the law did. So that when someone calls an attorney up and says, hey, I got an odometer tampering case, will you take it? In the old days, they'd say, well, gee, what's it worth? Now they say, oh, I can get my attorney fees paid out of it. So that's the purpose of the law. But it's always been against the law on some level. It's just a question of which law. So there you go. A little tidbit for those of you who are trying to learn law 5 minutes at a time. So Barry and Corey, thanks for sending it from justice.gov, Department of Justice. 2 New Jersey men plead guilty in Pennsylvania in scheme involving odometer tampering and title fraud. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Hold the wheel and drive.